Welcome back to Opening Surprises, and we have something for the Dutch defense today. d4, f5. But keep in mind that gradually over time, Dutch players and many Dutch books are no longer recommending the straight d4, f5 move order because there's so many nasty anti-Dutch lines to contend with. Players of the Dutch like Grandmaster Simon Williams have been playing e6 on move 1, and they're completely comfortable with facing e4, d5, getting to a French defense. So they do an e6 against everything repertoire. So we need to have a little something for 1 e6 and 1 g6 potential transpositions into the Dutch. They're trying to get back to the main lines while shirking fun things. So what I have prepared for e6 for you is c4, and then this key move a3. This is going to cut down on the majority of lines where it's got a Nimzo-Indian flair with an early bishop b4, and after knight f6, knight c3. Since the b4 square is not available to the bishop, they're going to go to the next best square, e7, and after bishop f4, e3, d6, h3. And so far in the database, when I looked at ChessBase Online, there's been 5 games and white has won all of them. This is a roughly balanced position by engine estimation, but I'd like to showcase an idea. Typically, h3 is a London system move just to be able to tuck the bishop away in the event of a move like knight h5. And this particular variation, with a pawn on f5, we could look in some lines to play g4 and castle queenside. So keep this in mind as you're playing these variations. The solid and straightforward knight f3, queen c2, bishop d3 is likely going to be fine here, or bishop e2, because e5 may be an issue and we'd want a rook on d1. Now that I've gotten the arrows out of the way, let's come back. d4, g6. This is the other way that many Dutch players are trying to reach their desired position. e6 is going to be far more popular as you'll have the classical Dutch as well as the Stonewall, but g6, they're angling for the Leningrad. And for my c4 players, I think the best move order is still going to be with e4, followed by c4, where, say if you're a classical King's Indian player, you should feel right at home, and there's really no point in time where black can transpose back into their Dutch that they were angling for. So d4, f5, onto our main move and the star move, so to speak. Queen d3, just immediately putting the question to the pawn. Never bring your queen out early, they tell me, but it's never bring your queen out early if it can be punished, if she can be attacked, if we're losing time. But we're going to see some exceptions to this here. So after queen d3, there are a number of playable moves. So let's go through the branches which are very unpopular first, like the pre-move knight f6. Well, you just lost a pawn for free here. We can retreat without difficulty. Well, what about knight c6? Knight c6 is one of the best moves by engine estimation, and it's little played. But we've got a bit of a novelty here as we go d5, putting the question to the knight. And in all previous games, queen b3 had been very, very popular here. But I like the retreat. Queen d1, it's quiet. And the main point is this knight on b4 is going to get kicked back. And the moves that we're going to get are going to be space-taking, like a3 and b4. So after knight f6, we simply need to defend this pawn. And now finally this knight is getting kicked around. a5 is a good prophylactic move to make sure we're not getting too much space on the queen side. But say after knight f3, we have straightforward development. And I like fianchettoing the bishop here, as likely we'll be able, once the bishop reaches d2, to put our knight on d4, and it's going to be hard for black to generate the natural breaks that they're looking to play against our d5 pawn with. So that covers two of our lines with knight f6 and knight c6. Now let's go to one of the fun variations, g6. This is also not played very often because we have immediate attacking potential against this pawn structure with h4. And if given the opportunity, we will play h5. And this is a very fun position where black's king is out in the open. And to go a few more moves to show an example game here, we're just performing basic development. Whereas black is struggling to generate any sort of plan, and by engine estimation, white has a solid advantage where we're looking to castle by hand with king f1, and we're looking for rook c1 followed by an attack on the king. We're basically headhunting the entire variation from the point that the king is checked and has to move. The other way for black to go here would say be bishop g7, and again h5 is our move. If black played h5 themselves, it's going to leave that g6 pawn weak, and that can quickly be a target. So we see moves like e6, and this is following a previous game. Queen g3 if that g6 pawn becomes weak, and white had a very easy time first grabbing the bishop pair, and this is already roughly +3 with very easy development. Castle, get the bishop out of the way, swing the rook over. So we've knocked out all of the side systems at this point. Now we're starting to get to what's been more popular after 2 queen d3. First, let's take a look at d6. And in the past, this interesting gambit move, g4, was recommended against the majority of the variations, but modern engines have shown that this line doesn't work in all cases. Here in particular, after f takes g4, we have the reversed Binko idea of h3 offering another pawn. And this accelerated development already with the queen on d3, it's just not recommended at all to capture, as after the trades we're taking back with the rook, and it's just a difficult position for black to handle with this open h-file. So one of the typical moves we'll see here is g3. And depending upon the structure that black has is how we're going to infer capturing back the g-pawn. So we'll see with e6, we're going to be taking back with the queen, versus here, likely black will be able to play g6 and bishop g7, and the queen won't be as well placed on g3. So we want to capture back f takes g3 here, and after a few moves, we have basic development, easy position. And coming back to d6, if knight f6, we will happily get this bishop out here, looking to take space in the center, and we're already in a pretty novel position. I feel like black will play moves like knight c6, knight d7, just natural enough moves. The best move by engine estimation was c5, and I do feel that we want to keep the tension, and we're going to be angling at some point to play f3 and e4 to get our time back and space. First, we need to handle the threat on the queen. There's that key move, followed by e4. And this is a very good perk, or say King's Indian same-ish structure for white, where we've already got the attacking potential on the h-file. We just need to shore up where our king is eventually going. And we're seeing another, say, same-ish King's Indian idea with knight c1, with the idea of the knight relocating to b3, bishop b2, and if black is brave enough to come over here, we can of course swing the queen over for a big attack. We have our pawn's worth and then some in this position. So the second most popular move is e6, and we're back to our g4 idea. After takes, h3. First, let's look at if queen h4. The main motif here is looking to capture on g4 as soon as we played bishop g2 to protect our rook. So first, we offer for them to capture the pawn. The queen's not really going anywhere here. One way or another, black is going to waste time. Bishop e4. Now we're ready to capture. And already in this example game, knight f6 was played, which is a mistake because now we're going to kick the queen all over the board. Bishop f3, only one good square, e4, knight e2, the knight's coming to f4 at some point, and we can very easily move our bishop out, castle, bring the rook over, and find attacking position utilizing those open H and G files for the rook. Last but certainly not least in e6 is that same theme we saw before with g3. And unlike the previous variation where we took with a pawn, the bishop is likely coming out on the diagonal. So they would need to waste another tempo playing g6 to defend. So queen takes g3 is the better move here. And rook g1. And I like this example game, how it played out, as since the queen is over here, c3 was a necessary move to cover the square so the knight won't come in. But generally, this was a very straightforward position to play. e4 could be played here, but nothing wrong with e3 by any measure. Knight b3 looking to invade on the c5 square, b6 shutting us out, and one more positional maneuver, knight c1, followed by knight d3, where white has complete control over the e5 square and is pressing and went on to win in a correspondence game from 2021. So now on to the main event, by far the first choice for black and the overall main line. And like I said, for many years it was considered that this move g4 is the universal move to be played. But for my Dutch players, I find the answer e5 to be interesting, fascinating, and a fun game, especially if you're playing black. So something to look into, because after de, knight c6, after the queen moves, this is the type of creative and interesting positions that Dutch players really strive for. I don't think that white has gotten their surprise value if this line is played. So I'm not recommending g4 against the main line d5. I'm going to be recommending the solid knight f3, and let's showcase some ideas that are involved with the Dutch where both f5 and d5, a Stonewall-esque pawn structure we'll say, is played. It's all about how we deal with the knight that gets to e4. So as we're developing pieces, let's first go through the sideline. If they try to rush the attack, we're going to set up a solid London system structure. We've got all of our typical moves, and like was mentioned before, this can sometimes be a precursor to being able to play g4. But in this case, we have just a super solid, I've just developed my piece's position. a5 is the first move we have to watch out for as black is looking to play bishop a6. So we put the queen on the most natural square in queen pawn games. Trade a set. Stop that expansion on the queen side. And now how to handle the knight on e4. This is a critical plan. Very rarely is it a good idea to capture this knight unless we're able to play the critical move f3. f3 kicks this knight out one way or another or gets counterplay against the pawn that's going to be there. So in this case, knight takes e4 is played, but immediately queen e2 is played with that idea of f3 or f4. After queen d7, since our bishop is so well placed, might as well throw in a mate threat here. And after f3, we have the better pieces in every aspect with room to press for a win. I can't stress enough how often I've seen students mess up the dynamic once a knight reaches to e4. So let's go through one more scenario in the main line to emphasize proper play against this knight. and you'll be good to go with facing the Dutch in general. Well, the stone wall, that is. So after knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, I am not worried about the capture on f4 because we will have cement control over e5. So after castles, knight c3, to emphasize this, pressure on the e6 pawn, defense is needed. Now we're the one with the knight that can never be kicked out, quite annoying. And I'll go with engine estimation all the way to this ending where white just has a very small but stable plus in the heavy piece ending. The b2 pawn is a bit poisoned due to queen takes d5, and we're looking to simply castle by hand and bring our rook into the game, and the danger is past c pawn is going to be something for black to worry about. So coming back for a final time, we have knight f3. We get our solid setup, and now that we're not worried about them capturing our bishop, we understand how that position's better for us. Let's go back to dealing with the critical move in the stonewall structure, knight e4. And it should be noted as well, c5 is typically going to be a bad move in queen pawn games, in the Slav especially, as black will be looking to play an e5 break at some point, which will undermine our chain. So keep that in mind, that c5 is very rarely going to be a move I want to see. Whereas if we leave the potential here, if they ever capture, we're just going to have pressure on the backwards e6 pawn. So leave the tension for you, it's favorable. Bishop e2, after we castle, knight a6, looking to hop into b4, so we just decline that. Now queen c2, bishop d3. Black's taking time for maneuvering, so we can do the same. And now we've reached the critical plan. We've talked about the necessity of f3. So that means we're going to need to move the knight. So we find the most optimal way to move the knight. I want to claim the e5 square. And now, after f3, black has done all of this maneuvering to organize the knights for full harmony and control over e4, in which the simple pawn move f3 just takes it away. So bishop e8, they're trying to get the bad bishop to a useful square, but c5, if there's no e5 break, c5's quite good. b4, and you'll never be able to break if I keep a pawn there. And after b6, this is already a +2 position, improving on a Title Tuesday game that happened in July of 2024. Compare the bishops, compare the knights once our knight reaches d4. This is a dream position. Hopefully you enjoyed how to play against the Dutch with the surprising queen d3. If you did, press the like button and check out our other videos. And if you have a line that you find interesting that you'd like for me to cover, drop it down below. Love to hear from you.